So thank you. I appreciate Daniel always, or whoever, was it Mr. Mike? I know you put it away. So if you're not here for some reason, then it just stays here sometimes until somebody comes and grabs it. But anyway, I wasn't complaining about the positioning. I was just commenting that I'm very sensitive to the air here because I'm struggling with some severe dry eye, my right eye. The eye doctor said that it's most sensitive, I don't know, part of your body, 10,000 pain receptors or something. So anyway, so welcome to the Adult Sunday School. We're going through Ecclesiastes, and I'm your host, extremely grumpy Grant. This has been a challenging morning. I made the mistake of getting some work done yesterday, and today my body is tired and wants to sleep. So anyway, that is the flesh. That's the flesh. But, you know, and that's what Solomon is really largely talking about here in a lot of Ecclesiastes. There are some verses that I'll pull out later. But so we've gone through the first half of Ecclesiastes. And there's, let's see, there's a couple things I want to point out. First, I don't remember if I mentioned this, but verse 5 through 7, it talks about the sun also riseth and goeth down and hasteth to a place. But it talks about the wind and how it goes certain directions and whirleth about continually. But then it says the word circuits. So a circuit is you have a circuit when you're racing. So it's pre-planned. And when you look at the next verse, it talks about, the rivers rain into the sea, but the sea's not full. He knows there's a cycle there, okay? And let's see, so what I'm trying to point out in a not very elegant way is that there's actual, I don't like the way I said that. There is science in here that scientists didn't know for thousands of years. The concept of evaporation. Job is the same way. I think Job has more, but the concept of evaporation, that whole cycle that we take for granted that we learned in grade school, it's like the circle of life for water. That wasn't come up until like, when was it? I thought I wrote that down, but really late, like the full theory hadn't come up or been posited until I think the 1800s. So there's knowledge here beyond just, what you think there is, theological type things. There's actually science in the Bible, and you won't see incorrect things. And Kelly's pointed out multiple times, they talk about archaeology, and they discovered Nineveh and all these things. The scientists say, oh, this didn't exist because they haven't discovered it yet, and then they discover it, and they're like, oh, okay, it does exist. So one thing, whenever somebody says something's wrong in the Bible, it's important to, they could be a good person, quote unquote good person, but they're just flat out wrong. And I spent some time, actually read the book Age of Reason, borrowed it from Kelly, because my great uncle basically there had been a missionary of Satan, in essence, that had gone around to all these farmers and stuff and told them, how the Bible wasn't real, and that was the basis of what he used. So I got the book, and Thomas Paine wrote it? Yeah. So Thomas Paine is famous for Common Sense, which is a kind of a little pamphlet he wrote, and he's famous for that, but his Age of Reason, on the surface, the very surface, to a layman like me, like you look at it and you go, oh wow, these are direct contradiction. But then, so I took everything he said and then I studied it out. And there was, it's easy for me because I have the internet and all sorts of resources and whatnot, but it's really easy to say, oh, this is what that actually means, and they don't understand. They lack the proper context. That was usually the issue. So keep that in mind. And why do I say that? Everybody should know that, right? Well, sometimes people will say things, even sometimes like J. Vernon McGee, if you go back and listen to his stuff, every once in a while, he'll correct the Bible. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And so it's something where you always have to trust what the Bible says. If you don't understand why there are some seeming contradictions, you need to study it. What is it? 2 Timothy 2:15. This is, I'm going to spend a bunch of time getting here. Pastor used to read this for our discipleship class when we were doing that. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So that's where you go study, and hopefully you'll study more. You'll get more curious. The more time you spend with God, the more interested you'll get, the more benefits you'll get. Our relationship with God, and trust me, I struggle. My flesh fights with me mightily every day, but the more time I spend with God, it really translates into the happier I am because I'm increasing my wisdom, and wisdom gives you all sorts of good stuff, which we had talked about previously. But so I wanted to point that out, that there's science in there, and in verse 8 it says, all things are full of labor, man cannot utter it, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And so there's no satisfaction in life. It's always temporary, right? You might get full, but then a few hours later, you're hungry again. That's just, and it's frustrating, but that's life unless you're saved. And so there's kind of this, what I believe Solomon's doing is setting up, and at the very end of the book, it really shows you that he's setting up that you can try everything there is in the world, but there's no point to any of it, and there's no true satisfaction, no lasting satisfaction without God. A lot of people just say this is kind of a book of philosophy, and in many ways it is. Philosophy is man's way of trying to find things out. One of the things I wanted to mention was when it says, is there any, verse 110, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new, it hath already of old time, which was before us. Things that affect life. There's things that make our life easier sometimes. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. There's really nothing. There's nothing that affects your daily life, and then there's this hanging. You ever heard the term of pregnant silence? That's kind of what it feels to me like this is building. There's something to come. There's an answer to all of this. Pregnant silence means you're waiting for a response or something. If you ask a question, do I look pretty in this dress or something, and then your husband doesn't respond very quickly, that's a pregnant silence. The answer is yes, because your wife always looks pretty. Beauty is subjective. All right, so new section, the Ecclesiastes 1:12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised with. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I communed with mine own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and increaseth knowledge, increaseth sorrow. Now we can find like, hey, we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about wisdom. Wisdom's not bad, right? Well, this is kind of, I don't know, I guess I'd say intermediate, if not, it's something you need to realize sooner rather than later whenever you read the Bible. And that is, not every word always means exactly the same thing. And I've tried to say that, like the word baptized, it just means immersed. So you can be baptized in fire if you want. Well, that means you're going to hell. You're going to be cast into the lake of fire at some point. That's not a good thing, all right? But when we generally talk about baptized, it is a good thing because people are getting baptized with water, and that means they've gotten saved and they've, usually done a little bit of discipleship to know that they are saved and to know that they understand what they're doing. So it's important to realize that words mean, some words sometimes have a little bit different meaning. Now wisdom, we know this isn't, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And that is, wisdom can be godly wisdom, which is what we have in Proverbs, or it can be worldly wisdom, which is what he's talking about here. But I'm kind of jumping ahead. There are a couple of words I had written down, and I probably should have had one more written down. But, so the word perfect, this is a word that it can, if you don't understand the meaning of this word, it can be discouraging. Because we think of perfect as in flawless. But perfect means complete. So if you can be a complete Christian because you're doing what God wants you to do. It doesn't mean you're going to be a perfect Christian like we think of it. So that's, it talks about the perfection of the saints. Where we get saved, that's our positional sanctification. All right, well now we have, I think Kelly calls it practical sanctification. I learned it as progressive sanctification. Either way, ideally you're going to be getting more, you're going to be getting closer to God. Now sometimes people go up and then they go down. I think Brother Mike mentioned something about that, which I wanted to comment. He talked about somebody that was pestering him to go to church before he got saved, and if I get any details wrong, shout them out. And then he started going to church at some point, and that guy had kind of dropped out, and he asked him, why? And the guy's like, well, the more you do this, the harder it gets. And that's not true. I meant to look this up, but, and so this is off the cuff, and so it's going to be wrong. But, you know, God gives us a light burden. His yoke is easy and the burden is light. So if you've got this heavy burden on you and there's not some sin that God's convicting you of, you need to step back and say, is this God or is this man? Because man does it all the time. And I haven't really seen that in this church. I mean, I've been here for over 20 years, so I've seen a little bit, but those people aren't here anymore. It doesn't get harder. I think if anything, it gets easier. Because you see the actual results of faith. And you don't have to worry. And if you find yourself worrying, well, you know, you need to pray about that. And give it to God and keep praying about it and earnestly pray and potentially have others pray. I mean, my job right now is just, I'm not overworked, but I don't know what's going on. It's stressful because I don't have a lot to do, but there's all these things going on around me in directions. We just found out that we have this huge complex, multiple buildings. We have a gate, full-time security. Well, I just found out that they're selling that. So these like 4 or 5 buildings and they decided they're gonna sell it and go somewhere else. And they say nearby, but who knows? So, but I don't worry very much because God has helped me time and time before. And I lean on that, and I know that he will never leave me nor forsake me. And so if something bad does happen, I know from Romans 8:28 it's going to work together for good. So if I lose my job, trust me, that would upset me greatly because I'm the sole provider. That will be a fire and a trial for me, but there will be something better on the other end. And so that gives you a confidence. Sorry, I'm not making a lot of progress going forward, but first verse, preacher was king over Israel and Jerusalem. Once again, we know it's Solomon. Here's what I wanted to mention earlier. We have had no advancements in philosophy, really. I mean, who cares, right? Philosophy shouldn't affect a Christian at all. And some of the philosophy has, I think, some godly principles drawn from common sense and things like that. But you shouldn't go to philosophy. So there's one, man, for all of our pride, and we think we're more sophisticated. I heard somebody say earlier, talking about spanking their children, he's like, well, we just weren't as evolved back then. We hadn't progressed as far. And I'm like, oh. Anyway, and that is wrong. So, no new things. There's no new answers to what we're here for. Pregnant pause again. Except Jesus. That's the unspoken here. I gave my heart, verse 13, I gave my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. So once again, wisdom, this is man's wisdom. So he's going out and he's trying to learn things and grow, which there's nothing wrong with learning and growing. We need to do that. But he's trying to apply his brain to the meaning of life. And that's foolishness. You're not going to have an answer. It's going to be very depressing. And that's why he talks about vanity and vexation. So he's seen all the works that are done under the sun. It's vanity and vexation. And so I want to point out the under the sun phrase. If you don't get anything from my, what I'm saying in Ecclesiastes, at least realize that under the sun is a, from man's perspective, without God and his answers for all this. He says, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. I mean, that's pretty dark. He says, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. Oh, let me back up. So I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom. Okay, great, except you need to note, he's got his heart here. So I always try to pay attention when somebody's talking about their heart, because it's usually a bad thing, because your heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. So follow your heart. Horrible advice. Your heart is desperately wicked. It's tough. My son Titus, he wanted to buy a car. He bought an El Camino for a few $1,000s, which looked really nice, and discovered it had massive electrical problems. He was able to get it home. He tore it apart, and now it's a Hulk, and he has to pay somebody lots of money to fix it. I'm not saying he didn't pray about this. I have no idea. We prayed about it. And I'm not saying that was the wrong decision, because God can use that to teach him things. But your heart will say, yes, I want that El Camino. I can take him or leave him, but that's what your heart wants. Your heart wants whatever it is that your heart wants, which is why they say the heart wants what the heart wants. And, well, you kind of have to rein that in. And that's hard. It is really hard to control your heart. I gave my heart to somebody once before I met Rebecca, who was a good Christian woman. And she took my heart, put it in a blender, and hit frappe. Okay, so I tried to do everything right, and I think that I did. And, I got cold water poured over me, because God was learning, he was using that to grow. So it's always important to note things like heart. So when he talks about his heart and under the sun, we pay attention to those. But I think verse 16 is kind of funny, because he says, I communed with mine own heart, saying, lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Now this is true, kind of, because he for all his wisdom, he made horrible mistakes. But it's also wildly arrogant and prideful. There's a lot of hubris here. I wrote down he's full of himself. He's like, well, certainly I can find this out. Like, I prayed to God for wisdom to rule my people. And Solomon is considered to be the wisest man in the Bible, but he also is probably the most foolish man in the Bible. If you don't count like Judas or something. It's important, going back to when he gives his heart, it's important to put energy into things you want the answers to. In 1 Timothy 4:15, it says, meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. But it's talking about biblical things. It's not talking about worldly things. So it is important to meditate, and meditate is not transcendental meditation, which is what everybody thinks of. I know I do. Even now, when people say meditate, sometimes my brain goes there. But And that's where you empty your mind. Well, meditating in the Bible is different. It is where you're focusing. If you're thinking about one verse and you're kind of chewing on it, or it's going through your head all day, which, maybe has happened, maybe it hasn't to you, but hopefully it has, because it shows that you're meditating on it. When you run into verses, things you don't understand in the Bible, so doing what I did for many years, which is like, don't know what that means. Guess I'll never know. Shucks. And moving on, you should chew on it. You should pray about it, and you should go back to it and try to figure it out. I know that's easier said than done, but that is what we should do, because in Proverbs 2, it talks about, seeking and digging for wisdom. So God gives us wisdom if we ask for it, but he also wants us to pull it out. He wants us to dig for it. Ecclesiastes is a challenging book, most challenging one I've ever tried to teach on, because first of all, there aren't nearly as many commentaries on it. Ironside doesn't have one, and he's always been my go-to. David Cloud, from all I could find, I have like one page, and half of it's a quote from Kelly about how philosophy is useless. So, but he doesn't say a lot. He just says, but I think there's more to Ecclesiastes. I think there's some nuance here. I think we should, because I think we really need to study and understand this, because there is some truth in here, and we'll see when we get later on. He kind of has under the sun, and then there are these moments where it's like, where he said that pregnant pause. He starts kind of dropping hints, and I shouldn't say any more because, well, we're not to that chapter yet. But it's challenging, but it's important for us to study. It's important for us to think about these things and to pray about these things and try to find why God put this in here. Like, he didn't write the Bible. We can get value out of everything. And that's kind of a change that I didn't realize for most of my life. We can get value out of the Old Testament. We can get value out of Leviticus, which is the book of law, right? There's value there. We can get things out of that. Now, it's maybe not obvious, but there is so much value throughout all the Bible that even books where you just go, well, this is all this means. I think there's more value here. I did find an independent Baptist preacher who I've been listening to some of his sermons, and he's got 44 sermons on Ecclesiastes. So that's a good amount. Not as much as that other guy who had over 100, but there's something here. I think there's more than just, let's skip to the end. If you don't want to come to Sunday school anymore, you should, I don't want you to leave without knowing the end. And of course, I can't, I'm the complete wrong book. All right, so in chapter 12, it says, verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of men. For God shall bring every work unto judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Ecclesiastes is, and I know I'm kind of jumping around and not as cohesive as I would like to be, but it's the favorite book of atheists I have read, and I believe that to be true. In fact, I was watching a movie over Thanksgiving, and a person tried to give a guy a Bible, and he responded with, he responded with verse 18, for in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. I'm like, wow, somebody gave you the truth, literally handed it to him, he had it in his hands, and he said this, and it's like, no, you're just looking at it from your point of view. The Bible is the truth. The Bible is where you get happiness. The Bible is where you may have some sorrow, but it's godly sorrow, and it worketh good. It's not a bad thing. And I was just, I told my wife, that's Ecclesiastes. And I think it was actually King James as well. But I guess, all right. So verse 15, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I haven't done my words yet. But it says in Isaiah 44, and this is where the cross references are good. I didn't use cross references for very much, but if you read something in your Bible and you're like, look at the cross references. That's why, study Bible is good. Most of my reading over the years hasn't been in a study Bible. I'm changing that. But Isaiah 40 verse 4 says, every valley shall be exalted, every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. So, but he's right from one point of view, from the man's point of view, but God is going to do this. And so I think, he's just setting up. He's setting up this. He's trying to get people to make that progression on their own, because you can't take somebody, or at least it's extremely rare in my experience, you can take somebody who has grown up in the world and then give them the truth and have them understand it and then get saved. God has to call them. They need to, usually they don't understand. They hear the words you're saying, but it doesn't make any sense to them. So, one of the words that I brought, which is actually, I think, in the next section, but I didn't do this one, did I? I did perfect. Prove. So prove, you can probably figure this out from the context most of the time when you're reading it, but I did want to mention this, but it basically means to test it. If you say, my dad can beat up your dad, and they say, prove it, well, you got to get in the boxing ring and show that your dad can beat up his dad. Your dad's probably not going to agree. So I think the last thing I want to say talk about verse 18, for much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. So it says, 1 Corinthians 3, 18 through 20, let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, he taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain. So, I think we know from that my explanation that this is man's wisdom, not God's wisdom, is true. But then there's also practical experience. Part of wisdom is knowledge. That's the first piece. You have to get knowledge. And then when you understand some things in the world, you know what? It makes you less happy. There's a certain, when you're naive about things, or you just don't know about horrible things in the world, you don't have something pulling you down. But if you're, as a Christian, I struggle with this. I have to remind myself that God's in control, and these things I say unto you that have much peace, that, I'm spacing it. in this world you shall have much tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. You know, God tells us right there, yes, we're going to have tribulation, and there's going to be things that are sad and heartbreaking in some ways, but we're supposed to be of good cheer. And so if you don't have God, if you don't have that peace, you are just going to see the sorrow. All you see is the bad. You see people killing other people. You see children starving to death. You see these horrible things. And honestly, that's stuff that I've been aware of for a long time, but the stuff that depresses me more is things I've learned about our country, which I won't tell you because I don't want to depress you. You look at famines or massacres, it's very depressing. So, now that I've talked about how everything's depressing, it's probably a good place to end it. But no, God tells us we are to be of good cheer. When I struggle, because I'm not a cheerful person by nature, unfortunately, I try to remind myself to rejoice in the Lord, always. And again, I say rejoice. I try to remind myself to be of good cheer. I'm not supposed to be down in the mouth or depressed or downcast, or I've been called Eeyore before. And I try to fight that because I don't want to be. Of course, usually it's just the people that really know me well call me that, because it's hard to put on a happy face all the time. But God gives us peace. He gives us joy. God is love. And we have, no matter what's going on in your life, you have something to be thankful for. If you're saved. I'm assuming people here are. So anyway, all right, I will pray to dismiss. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We just thank you for everybody who's able to come, and I just pray that you would bless them, and I pray that they were able to get something out of this mess of words. I pray there was some truth and value that you could use, that you would encourage the people that hear this and help them to seek and to serve you, Lord. It's serving you and laying up treasure in heaven, doing what you want, raising kids in a godly manner and teaching them, and the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That's value. That has value. Things like that, Lord. Help us to do that in our lives. And please bless the other services today, the worship service in the morning, the evening service, the song services. We just thank you for everybody who works on this and puts forth energy, and we just pray you would bless